Welcome, I'm your target demographic. Today we are talking a storyline that happened in the comic books, but how it might come to play in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Now this is basically a pitch for something that could potentially happen. I'm not saying I want it to happen, but if they were going to try to translate something to the screen, here's how it might turn out. There's a storyline in the comics called, well, first it's the House of M, followed by an event called Decimation. And this is where the character Scarlet Witch utters a few words that says no more mutants and basically rids the world of mutants except for a very small number. And this is one of the defining storylines for the Scarlet Witch. And so people are wondering, how could something like that happen? And the knee-jerk reaction is it can never happen because mutants don't exist in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And a lot of it has to do with the character of Magneto, who used to be their father. And Magneto belongs to Fox Studios, so there's no Magneto and there's no mutant, so how could you ever have House of M or Decimation? But I have an interesting pitch that could be kind of cool. We'll see. So after some of the big events we're about to see, Civil War, Infinity War, Ragnarok, there's going to be some big events. And maybe Wanda says the world might be better without people with powers that can do these crazy things. So she makes a judgment call and says not no more mutants, but no more powers. You know, much more broad. Maybe because she's an experiment in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, she even sees herself as this abomination and says, people like me should not be able to do what we can do. We are making the world a worse place. So she says this sentence and alters reality. But she does say Earth, which creates a bubble almost that other characters are unable to enter, which we'll talk about in a second. So we then get a movie that sees our characters in a different way. And this is the closest we'll probably ever get to a movie that exists in a different continuity, like a what-if story for the Marvel Cinematic Universe. This is the closest we would ever get. So now we see a story of our characters without powers. And let's talk about Captain America first. He is reverted back to the scrawny little guy that he used to be. They don't remember their past lives, but he feels like something is off. But he exists in today's world, but unable to do anything, still working for the military, still wants to be a soldier, but just really unable to cut it, so he's probably in some sort of other capacity in the military. And he does feel like he's a bit out of time, like he doesn't quite belong here, but he doesn't remember why or know why. And then we have Dr. Banner, the Hulk, and he is no longer the Hulk. So he actually is living a happy life, right? Maybe he has a family, maybe we see the return of Liv Tyler. He is able to have a happy life, no longer burdened by the Hulk. So when things inevitably return back to normal, he has the most tragic story. So now, since there was no Captain America, that means S.H.I.E.L.D. never really happened, which means they don't really exist now, which means the Black Widow is still probably working for Russia, some sort of spy for them. And this also means that S.H.I.E.L.D. never recruited Tony Stark. So Tony Stark does still have his Iron Man suits, you know, all of that, nothing changed. But no one really put him on the track to really becoming a hero. And so we see a kind of amped up version of what we saw in Age of Ultron, where his robots are now basically policing the world, but he doesn't really have anyone holding him accountable in any sort of way. In terms of the sidekicks, War Machine is still working with Tony Stark because he's much more tied to the government. But Falcon was never recruited by Captain America, so Falcon is just a war veteran, kind of doing what he was doing at the start of Winter Soldier. Scarlet Witch and her brother, he's alive, but neither of them have powers, and they're living in this Eastern European country. I forget what they said in the movies where it was. And they are under the rule of some dictator, some leader that is not a good guy. He's kind of the villain in this story. And they're just normal people living in that country. And then things start to escalate. The villain is the leader of that country, and there's a revolution. And now the US has to decide, do they step in? Potentially this could be a puppet government that the US wants to keep in control, but they're doing some pretty diabolical things. And so it brings up some moral questions that characters like Steve Rogers, who's working for the military but not a soldier, that Tony Stark and his peacekeeping robots, they have to decide, do we step in? What is our role and what do we do? Now I mentioned earlier that there's something confining this reality or, you know, cleaning their memories, whatever, to Earth. And that's where we see Thor, who exists outside of this, and he remembers this. And he kind of throughout the story could have some sort of journey where he finds some sort of mystical way to revert them back to their normal selves. Maybe there's a threat that's about to happen that only superpowered people can stop, and he needs them to be fully powered. This would also bring in the character of Doctor Strange, because this would happen after the Doctor Strange movie, if it ever happens. This is just a stupid theory. But the two of them, you know, their otherworldly knowledge and their sorcery and magic knowledge could figure out a very powerful way to, you know, get Scarlet Witch to turn it back to normal or undo what she has done. So I think something like that would be really interesting, like a story where our characters are, it's a different look at them. It's a different version of them. And we don't really get much of that, but it would be them trying to find out what's missing. You know, Captain America saying, like, I used to be able to protect people. Like, I feel like I'm not me, but they don't know why. You know, Banner is in love and happy, but he knows that he's not supposed to be. You know, Scarlet Witch is able to reunite with her brother and she feels happy, but then in the end, it kicks back into what we know as our real reality. And she now has to lose her brother again. And she now has to cope with what she did to the world and the pain and suffering that she caused people. And so it would make her character kind of similar to what she is in the comics, where things are just like a little off with her, you know, and she's very unpredictable and very dangerous. And a storyline like this could show us the power that she's capable of without mutants, without Magneto. You know, just her inherent powers that she has, or I guess was given as an experiment. This would be the closest thing that we could ever see to a Decimation. But I think it'd be interesting. Maybe it's not a whole movie. You know, maybe it's something like the last act of Infinity War Part 1. Something like this happens. So when the movie opens, when Part 2 opens, things are just like off. You know, and then they have to kind of get everyone to remember so that they can stop Thanos. You know, who knows when this plot could happen, but I think Decimation is such a cool story for her that it would be a shame for her to never get that moment, because there's not really a lot else. I mean, there's some romance stuff with the Vision that they could pursue with her, but that is the best story for her that they could pick out of the comic continuity, so it'd be a shame to not see it happen. So, do you think there are aspects of Decimation that could make it to the big screen? Would you watch a movie like that? Do you think that could fit anywhere, or are you totally content? Don't even try it. Just let Wanda be a different Wanda. Let me know your thoughts. I'm super curious. If you have other ideas, put them down here. If you have other pitches for what might happen with Scarlet Witch, definitely put those in the comments too, and we'll see you next time on I'm Your Target Demographic.